The whispers of the Florentine night carried more than just gossip. They carried secrets. Dark alleys, concealed shadows moving with purpose, their cloaks hiding more than just the chill of the evening. Beneath the grandeur of the Medici palaces, within the bustling markets, and along the treacherous roads connecting Florence to the farthest corners of Europe, a hidden war raged. It was a war fought, not with swords and cannons, but with ink and parchment, with cryptic symbols and coded words. The very survival of the powerful Medici family, their vast banking empire, and their political influence hung by a thread woven from invisible messages and unbreakable ciphers. Imagine a world where a single intercepted letter could ignite a war, topple a government, or ruin a dynasty. This was the world of Medici agents, and their tools of deception were masterworks of cunning. Number 9. The Nomenclator Cipher. The chill of the Arno River mist clung to the stone walls of Palazzo Pitti. Lorenzo de' Medici, known as the Magnificent, often paced its grand halls late into the night. His eyes scanned dispatches from Rome, Milan, Venice, and beyond, his mind churning with the endless web of Renaissance politics. Many of these dispatches arrived looking like jumbled nonsense, a deliberate veil thrown over the crucial information they contained. This was the work of the Nomenclator Cipher, a favored tool in the Medici arsenal of secrets. It was not a simple code, it was a sophisticated system that combined two distinct methods of concealment. First, there was the basic substitution. Every letter of the alphabet was replaced by another symbol or letter. An A might become a Z, a B might become a Y, and so on. This alone would confuse a casual observer, but a determined adversary with time and skill could often break such a simple code. The Medici agents and the enemies they faced understood this vulnerability. The true power of the nomenclator came from its second, more intricate layer. Alongside the letter substitution, the nomenclator also included a list, a dictionary of pre-arranged codewords for common names, important places, and frequently used phrases. Imagine a message speaking of the Black Raven instead of Pope Sixtus IV, or referring to the Lion's Den when it meant the Venetian Senate. These codewords were randomly assigned, making them impossible to guess without the specific corresponding book. The codebook itself was a small, often leather-bound volume, sometimes no larger than a prayer book, carefully guarded by the Medici agent or their most trusted couriers. One side of the book would list the plaintext words and names, and next to them, their corresponding cipher symbols or words. The other side would be reversed, allowing for easy decryption. Consider a Medici ambassador in Rome, a man named Benedetto, tasked with reporting on the Pope's increasingly hostile intentions toward Florence. Benedetto would receive intelligence from his network of informants, disillusioned cardinals, disgruntled servants, bribed Vatican scribes. He would then sit at his writing desk, perhaps under the pretense of composing a letter to his family, and begin the painstaking process of encryption. He would open his small worn nomenclator codebook. The message might begin, "The Black Raven plots against the Lily." The Black Raven would not be substituted letter by letter. Instead, Benedetto would find the pre-assigned symbol or unique code word for Pope Sixtus IV in his book and write that down. And then, for the remaining words, he would consult the letter substitution table. Plots would become a string of different letters against another. The lily, representing Florence, would also have its own specific code word. The symbols themselves were often designed to look like a jumble of random letters, numbers, or even invented characters. Some Medici nomenclators incorporated false symbols, characters that had no meaning and were inserted merely to confuse anyone attempting to decipher the message without the key. These were decoys, linguistic dead ends designed to frustrate even the most skilled cryptanalyst. A single page of a Medici dispatch, perhaps sent from the court of Naples, concerning a proposed alliance, might contain a mix of these elements, some words substituted letter by letter, others entirely replaced by a single, unique code word for a person or concept, and sprinkled throughout. meaningless characters to throw off the scent. The creation of these nomenclators was a meticulous affair. It involved not only the choice of substitution alphabets, but also the careful selection of thousands of common words, names of individuals, titles, cities, countries, and even specific phrases like financial aid, military support, or secret negotiation. Each new Medici ambassador or high-level agent would receive a fresh, unique nomenclator painstakingly hand-copied by trusted scribes in Florence. The danger lay in capture. If an agent were caught with their codebook, the entire system could be compromised. This is why couriers often carried multiple copies of the same message, sometimes encrypted with different, slightly altered nomenclators, or even disguised as unimportant personal letters, just in case one fell into enemy hands. The courier would be instructed to destroy the codebook if capture was imminent, perhaps by tearing its pages into tiny fragments and scattering them in the wind, or even consuming them. Historians, sifting through the vast archives of Florence, have discovered many of these original nomenclator codebooks. Their pages reveal the immense complexity and foresight involved in their creation. They offer a glimpse into the minds of Renaissance intelligence operatives who understood that true security lay in layered deception, not just a single trick. A letter from an agent in Venice, sent in 1478, might describe the mood of the Doge. The decrypted message would then detail Venetian naval movements and the growing discontent among certain noble families, all veiled beneath the nomenclator's intricate layers. The discovery of such a cipher by an enemy power meant weeks, perhaps months, of difficult work, assuming they even realized it was a coded message and not just gibberish. Number 8. The Gronsfeld cipher. The biting wind whipped off the snowy peaks of the Apennine Mountains, chilling the cloaked figure riding south toward Florence. Inside his saddlebag, secured beneath layers of wool and leather, was a dispatch of vital importance from the Duke of Milan. This message was protected by the Gronsfeld cipher, a clever polyalphabetic substitution method that offered a significant leap in security compared to earlier, simpler codes. Unlike a basic substitution cipher where each letter always has the same replacement, the Gronsfeld cipher changed the substitution pattern based on a numerical key. Imagine a row of numbers, perhaps 147,823. This sequence was the key. When encrypting a message, each letter of the plaintext would be shifted by a different amount, determined by the corresponding number in the key. If the first letter of the message was A, and the first number in the key was won, the A would shift one place to become B. If the next letter was Peter, and the next key number was 4, the Peter would shift 4 places to become Te. The key numbers would repeat once the sequence was exhausted, cycling back to the beginning. This constantly changing shift made the Gronsfeld cipher far more robust. A common method for breaking simple substitution ciphers involved analyzing the frequency of letters. In English, lay is the most common letter, so a cryptanalyst would look for the most frequent cipher letter and assume it represented lay. With Gronsfeld, the letter E in a message would be encrypted differently throughout the text, appearing as FIL or whatever the key dictated at that specific point. This effectively flattened the letter frequency distribution, making it much harder to crack. A Medici agent, perhaps a Florentine merchant living in Milan, would receive a coded instruction regarding a loan negotiation with the Sforza family. The message might begin, "Arrange immediately the funds for the Duke." The agent would know the pre-agreed numerical key, say 314,159. The first letter A of Orange would be shifted by 3 places, becoming D. The R would be shifted by 1 place, becoming S. The R would be shifted by 4 places, becoming V, and so on. The message would become a string of seemingly random letters like Desvjofla Kiksgevierokjeksna. The length of the numerical key was crucial. A longer, less repetitive key offered greater security. Medici agents often used historical dates, significant numbers, or even arbitrary long strings of digits as their keys. The process of encryption and decryption was often carried out using simple paper tools. One common aid was a set of rotating disks or a pre-printed table resembling a multiplication grid. The rows and columns would be labeled with letters of the alphabet, and the numerical shifts would dictate which row or column to use. For example, to encrypt with a shift of 3, an agent would find and count 3 places along the alphabet, or look at the intersection of la and 3 on their table. These tables were sometimes disguised as financial ledgers or astrological charts to avoid suspicion if an agent was searched. Consider a scenario where a Medici diplomat in Venice needed to send urgent financial information back to Florence. The message might detail the amount of gold necessary to bribe a certain senator or the exact figures involved in a secret trade agreement. Such information could not fall into enemy hands. The diplomat, perhaps a man named Cosimo, would pull out his small bound cipher sheet. He would then, using the numerical key he had memorized or kept hidden, encrypt the message word by word, letter by letter. The resulting string of letters would then be written onto parchment, folded, sealed with the Medici signet, and entrusted to a swift, loyal courier. The couriers themselves were often unwitting participants in this complex game. They simply knew they were carrying important dispatches for the Medici. They had strict instructions to deliver the sealed packet directly to the designated recipient in Florence, and to guard it with their lives. The couriers were often ordinary men, sometimes merchants, sometimes former soldiers, chosen for their reliability and discretion rather than their intelligence about the message contents. Their routes were carefully chosen to avoid known banditry or areas of political unrest. The Gronsfeld cipher, though more advanced than simple substitution, was still vulnerable if the key was short and repetitive. Cryptanalysts of the time, often scholars with a keen eye for patterns, could sometimes deduce the length of the key by looking for repeated sequences in the ciphertext and then perform frequency analysis on letters encrypted with the same key number. However, for everyday communication of sensitive but not earth-shattering information, or for short, urgent messages, the Gronsfeld cipher offered a good balance of security and ease of use for the Medici network operating across Italy. It kept many a secret safe, enabling critical transactions and intelligence gathering to proceed unseen. Number 7. The transposition cipher. The air in the Medici counting house in Lyon was thick with the scent of old paper and beeswax. Amidst the clinking of coins and the rustle of ledgers, a discreet message was being prepared for Florence. This particular message would use a method that did not substitute letters but rather rearrange them. This was the transposition cipher, a method where the original letters of a message were kept intact, but their order was scrambled according to a pre-arranged rule. It was like taking a sentence and then mixing up the words, but in a much more systematic way. One of the simplest and most effective forms of transposition used by Medici agents was columnar transposition. To understand it, imagine a grid. The message, known as the plaintext, would be written into this grid row by row from left to right. Then, a numerical key would dictate the order in which the columns of the grid were read out to form the ciphertext. This cipher was particularly useful because it did not involve any complex character substitutions or codebooks. All that was needed was the key word, which could be easily memorized or disguised as something innocuous, like a family name or a common phrase. The security of the message depended on the length of the key and the secrecy of the rearrangement method. A longer key created a more complex rearrangement, making it harder for an unauthorized party to guess the original order. A Medici agent, perhaps a young apprentice learning the ropes of international finance, might be given a small rolled-up sheet of paper. On it, a series of seemingly random letters. He would be told, "This is from Master Filippo. Use Florence's as the guide." The word Florence would then be the keyword, and the apprentice would know to apply the columnar transposition method to decrypt the message, which might contain instructions for currency exchange or details about a new business venture. The beauty of transposition lay in its simplicity and its ability to completely obscure the original message from casual inspection. An intercepted message would look like a meaningless jumble of letters, offering no obvious patterns of letter frequency that cryptanalysts could exploit. It was often combined with other methods. Sometimes a message would first be transposed, and then the resulting ciphertext would be further encrypted using a substitution cipher, adding another layer of complexity. This multi-layered approach was a hallmark of Medici security. Medici correspondents frequently sent messages regarding the movement of goods, the progress of business deals, or the state of local politics from their branch offices across Europe. A critical report from Bruges about the wool trade might be secured using this method. The agent would painstakingly create the grid, write out the ciphertext, and then fold the parchment carefully, sealing it with the Medici crest in red wax. The parchment, a valuable commodity itself, would then be given to a trusted courier, often a young man with a strong horse and a quiet demeanor, who would embark on the perilous journey back to the heart of Tuscany. The success of these secret communications directly contributed to the Medici's ability to maintain their vast mercantile and political network, allowing them to stay one step ahead of their rivals. Number 6. The Porta Cipher. The flickering oil lamp cast long shadows across the small study in Bologna. A Medici agent, a scholar by trade, and a spy by necessity was preparing a delicate report for his patrons in Florence. The message contained sensitive information about potential unrest among the city's guilds, a development that could impact Medici trade routes and political influence. To protect this dispatch, he chose the Porta Cipher, a method renowned for its simplicity of use combined with a respectable level of security for its time. The Porta Cipher was a polyalphabetic substitution cipher, meaning that letters in the plaintext could be replaced by different letters throughout the message, depending on a key. Its genius lay in its elegant table-based system, which made encryption and decryption remarkably straightforward compared to some other polyalphabetic methods. It used a specific, pre-arranged table consisting of 13 rows, each row representing a shifted alphabet. Imagine a table. The top row would contain the letters A through Z. Each subsequent row would start with a different letter, and then list the rest of the alphabet in order, wrapping around. For example, row 1 might start with A, row 2 with B, and so on. But Porta's specific design was more unique. Each row was actually a pair of letters. For example, the first row might swap A with Z, with Y, and so forth. The next row would then shift this pairing. This symmetry was a key feature. The key for the Porta cipher was a word, similar to the Vigenère cipher, but the Porta method only used a key of 13 possible shifts. Let's say the keyword was Florence. The first letter of the plaintext message would be encrypted using the row corresponding to the first letter of the key. The second letter of the plaintext would use the row corresponding to the second letter of the key, and so on, repeating the keyword as needed. To encrypt a letter using the Porta cipher, the agent would find the first letter of the plaintext message, for example, U from unrest. Then they would look at the first letter of the keyword F. The Porta table was constructed so that for any given key letter like F, there would be a specific row that paired letters. If U was in the upper half of the alphabet, they would find it in the top row of that key letter's pair, and then its corresponding cipher letter would be found directly below it. If U was in the lower half, they would find it in the bottom row of the key letters pair, and its cipher letter would be above it. This peculiar pairing system meant that if you encrypted a letter using F as the key, and then encrypted the resulting ciphertext letter again using F as the key, you would get back the original plaintext letter. This made decryption very easy once the key was known. Let's assume the agent needed to encrypt the word unrest with the key Florence for U and key letter F. He would consult the Porta table under the fro. If U was paired with Y, then E would be the ciphertext letter. For N and key letter L, he would consult the row. If N was paired with Lo, then Low would be the ciphertext letter, and so on. The message would transform into a series of seemingly arbitrary letters. The true genius of the Porta cipher was that its tables were simple to construct and memorize, or to carry on a small disguised card. No complex machinery or large codebooks were needed. This made it ideal for agents who operated on the move or who needed to encrypt messages quickly under pressure. The security of the cipher rested entirely on the secrecy of the keyword. If the key was discovered, the messages could be easily read. A Medici agent, perhaps a young man named Andrea, dispatched to report on the activities of rival banking families in Genoa, would rely on such a cipher. Andrea would gather snippets of conversation, rumors from the docks, and insights from bribed clerks. He would then retreat to a rented room, pull out a piece of parchment and his small hidden Porta cipher table. He would write out his report in clear Florentine Italian first. The Spinola family seeks new trade routes to the east. Then, he would painstakingly encrypt it, letter by letter, using a pre-arranged key like Medici. The resulting jumble of letters would then be folded, sealed with a plain wax seal, and entrusted to a trusted courier, perhaps a seemingly innocent traveling merchant who would carry it back to Florence. The simplicity of the Porta cipher meant that it was less prone to errors during encryption or decryption, a critical factor for agents operating under stress. A single mistake could render an entire message unreadable or, worse, mislead the recipient. Its use by Medici agents highlights their pragmatic approach to cryptography. Choose a method that is secure enough for the information being transmitted, but also practical for their agents in the field. It allowed for quick, relatively secure communication that could be implemented anywhere, from a bustling marketplace to a quiet monastery, ensuring the continuous flow of intelligence that fueled the Medici's power. Number 5, the Affine cipher. The clanking of gears and the hiss of steam filled the workshop of a skilled artisan in Venice. He was secretly commissioned by the Medici to design and construct a new type of artillery piece, a weapon that could give Florence a significant advantage in any future conflict. Communication about such a sensitive project demanded a cipher with a mathematical foundation, something that would be difficult for even the most astute enemy cryptanalyst to unravel without the precise mathematical key. Here, the Medici agents might have employed a cipher embodying the principles of what we now call the Affine cipher. While the formal mathematical terminology of affine might be modern, the concept of using modular arithmetic for encryption existed in rudimentary forms during the Renaissance. The core idea of the affine cipher is to use a simple mathematical formula to encrypt letters. Each letter of the alphabet is first assigned a numerical value, typically A0, B1, up to Z25. The encryption formula is then ciphertext number E, a plaintext number, plus B modulo 26. Here, A and B are the secret keys. A must be chosen carefully so that it has no common factors with 26, e.g. 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 15, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25. B can be any number from 0 to 25. The modulo 26 means that after the calculation, you divide the result by 26 and take the remainder. This keeps the result within the 0 to 25 range, mapping back to the letters of the alphabet. This reliance on mathematics made the affine cipher a potent tool for Renaissance cryptographers. It was a step beyond simple substitution, as the single letter could have only one encryption, e.g. % for a given key, but the mathematical operation disguised that simple substitution with numerical transformations. Without knowing the exact values of A and B, attempting to brute force this cipher by trying all possible keys was a daunting task for the time. There were only 12 possible values for A that were coprime to 26, and 26 possible values for AB, leading to 12, 26, 312 possible keys. While this number might seem small to modern eyes, for Renaissance cryptanalysts relying on manual calculation and frequency analysis, it was a significant hurdle. Piero, the agent in Venice, would ensure his mathematical computations were flawless. He would meticulously write down the plaintext, convert each letter to its numerical equivalent, apply the formula, and then convert the result back to a letter. The resulting ciphertext would be written on fine Venetian paper, often interwoven with other, seemingly innocuous financial reports, to further obscure its true nature. The finished message would be sealed and dispatched with a courier bound for Florence, carrying vital strategic information about advanced weaponry, a secret that could tip the balance of power in Italy. The Medici understood that true innovation was not just about patronage of art and science, but also about mastering the tools of espionage and communication, even those hidden in the seemingly abstract world of numbers. Number 4. The Vigenère Cipher. The year's 1478. Lorenzo de' Medici faces the daunting threat of the Pazzi conspiracy, a plot supported by the Pope and his enemies to overthrow Medici rule and assassinate Lorenzo and his brother Giuliano. In such a high-stakes environment, every secret communication was a matter of life and death. For messages of supreme importance, Medici agents would have gravitated towards highly secure methods, and while the Vigenère cipher, as we know it was formally described later, the principles of polyalphabetic substitution, where a single letter could have multiple different ciphertext equivalents depending on its position, were certainly explored and employed. Alberti's disk, an earlier invention, embodied this very concept. Let's consider a method that applies the Vigenère principle, often attributed to the 16th century, but whose underlying ideas were present in earlier Renaissance ciphers. This method uses a keyword to encrypt a message. Each letter of the key determines a different shift for the corresponding letter of the plaintext. This makes frequency analysis, the most common method of breaking simple substitution ciphers, virtually impossible. The strength of this method lay in the fact that the same plaintext letter could be encrypted to different ciphertext letters throughout the message. For example, if there were two E's in secret orders, one might be encrypted with L from Florence and become P, while another E might be encrypted with N from Florence and become R. This completely masked the natural frequencies of letters in the original language, making traditional cryptanalysis methods useless. A Medici spymaster, perhaps a man named Bernardo, renowned for his sharp intellect, would oversee the encryption of a critical message detailing the movements of papal troops near Florentine territory. He would meticulously choose a keyword, perhaps a word from a beloved poem or a rarely used Latin phrase, one that was long and memorable. He would then hand the plaintext to a trusted scribe, who would use a pre-printed tabula recta disguised as a religious text or an astronomical chart to carefully encode the message. The process was slow and demanded absolute precision. A single mistake could compromise the entire message. The resulting ciphertext, a seemingly random string of letters, would be transcribed onto a small scroll, bound with twine, and sealed with a double wax seal, one with the Medici family crest, and another with a personal signet of the spymaster, an additional layer of authentication. This scroll would then be entrusted to a swift and reliable courier, perhaps a former soldier known for his ability to navigate treacherous mountain passes and avoid suspicious encounters. The courier's instructions would be simple: deliver this scroll directly into the hands of Lorenzo de' Medici himself, and allow no one else to touch it. The very concept of a polyalphabetic cipher, where the shift changed based on a keyword, represented a significant leap in cryptographic security during the Renaissance. It demonstrated an advanced understanding of how to thwart frequency analysis, a common method for breaking codes. The Medici's adoption of such complex methods for their most vital communications underscores their sophisticated approach to intelligence and security, recognizing that power was not just about armies and gold, but also about the ability to keep secrets and understand the secrets of their adversaries. This careful attention to cryptographic detail protected their agents, their plans, and ultimately their dynasty, often through the very darkest hours. Number 3. Steganography. The Florentine merchant, a man named Giacomo, sat calmly in the bustling inn near the Rialto Bridge in Venice. He had just concluded a significant trade deal but his true purpose was far more covert. He carried a message for the Medici, one hidden in plain sight, using the ancient art of steganography. Unlike ciphers, which disguise the content of a message, steganography disguises the existence of the message itself. If an enemy intercepted a dispatch, they would find nothing to suggest a secret was even being transmitted. One of the most common and effective steganographic methods used by Medici agents involved invisible ink. A seemingly innocuous letter, perhaps a mundane accounting of wool shipments, or a personal note to a family member, would be written first. The ordinary ink would be used for a plausible, overt message. Then, between the lines, or on the reverse side of the paper, the secret message would be written using a special invisible substance. Common substances for invisible ink in the Renaissance included lemon juice, milk, vinegar, or even urine. These organic fluids, when applied to parchment or paper, would dry clear and leave no visible residue. The secret message would be completely unreadable to the naked eye. A letter from Giacomo to his cousin in Florence might outwardly discuss the high price of saffron in Venice and the poor quality of recent shipments. But beneath these lines, written in lemon juice, could be the crucial intelligence Doge plans alliance with Ferrara against Florence. The recipient in Florence, knowing the prearranged method, would then apply heat to the parchment. Holding the paper carefully over a candle flame, a warm iron, or a heated stone, the acidic or protein-rich invisible ink would slowly oxidize and turn a light brown, revealing the hidden text. The process required patience and care, as too much heat could scorch the paper and destroy both the overt and covert messages. Another method of steganography involved extremely tiny writing, sometimes called microwriting, though not with the modern technology of microdots. A Medici agent might write a message on a thin strip of paper, so small it could be rolled up and concealed inside the hollow stem of a quill pen, or even stitched into the hem of a cloak or the sole of a shoe. A courier would carry a seemingly ordinary quill, unaware of the miniature scroll hidden within. There were also techniques involving hollow objects. In a book with a secretly carved-out section, a loaf of bread, or even the wax seal of a letter itself could be hollowed out to contain a tiny, folded message. The message might be written on silk, which is very thin and can be folded many times into a minuscule packet. Consider a scenario where a Medici agent, a young woman named Chiara, working as a lady-in-waiting in a rival court, needed to pass information about a planned assassination attempt against a Medici ally. She could not risk sending a coded letter that might be intercepted and broken. Instead, she might send a seemingly innocent invitation to a tea party, and on the back of the card, using alum dissolved in water as invisible ink, she would write the stark warning, "Beware the poisoned wine at the Duke's feast." Her contact in Florence would receive the invitation, and knowing the method would gently warm the card, revealing the critical warning. The beauty of steganography was its fundamental premise: if no one knows a secret message exists, no one will look for it. This made it a particularly effective method for high-risk communications where detection was paramount. And it required not just a secret medium, but also a trusted network of agents who knew how to send and receive such disguised communications. The success of these techniques often relied on the plausible deniability of the carrier. A courier carrying a normal letter or object would pass through checkpoints or inspections without raising alarm. Historians studying the Medici correspondence have sometimes found blank pages or seemingly empty spaces within letters that, when subjected to modern imaging techniques, have revealed faint traces of long-lost invisible inks, a testament to the ingenuity and secrecy employed by these Renaissance masters of espionage. These unseen messages allowed the Medici to build their powerful network, gather critical intelligence, and make informed decisions, often without their adversaries even knowing that a hidden war of words was constantly being waged around them. Number 2. Code names and jargon. The grand banquet hall in Florence buzzed with the chatter of nobles and dignitaries. Amidst the lavish display, two men exchanged seemingly casual remarks about the old vineyard and the troublesome harvest. To anyone else, it sounded like ordinary conversation between wine merchants. But these men were Medici agents and their words were carefully chosen code names and jargon, an essential layer of security in their world of intrigue. This method was not a cipher in the traditional sense, but a powerful means of obscuring meaning, making intercepted communications utterly bewildering to anyone outside the inner circle. Code names were pre-agreed alternative names for people, places, organizations, or even specific events. Lorenzo de' Medici himself might be known as the architect or the pater. Pope Sixtus IV, a frequent adversary, could be the shepherd with the crooked staff. Venice might be the Lagoon City, and Milan the Iron Serpent. These codenames were not random. They were carefully selected to be memorable to the agents, yet utterly opaque to outsiders. Sometimes they even held a subtle jab or a descriptive quality that only those in the know would appreciate. It was jargon. On the other hand, involved using everyday words with specific hidden meanings. Harvest might mean a military operation. Shipment could refer to a transfer of funds or a clandestine meeting. Fine wool might mean a new alliance, while spoiled grain could signal a broken treaty. The effectiveness of jargon lay in its ability to blend seamlessly into ordinary conversation or correspondence, making it almost impossible for an eavesdropper or interceptor to discern its true meaning. A Medici ambassador in Ferrara Giovanni might receive a coded message concerning the Duchess. The message, once decrypted from a substitution cipher, would still contain phrases like, "The Duchess is preparing the Feast of Roses, inviting many from the northern vineyards." To an untrained eye, this might sound like a social event. But to Giovanni, Feast of Roses might signify a major diplomatic summit, and northern vineyards could refer to a specific group of German mercenaries. The creation and dissemination of these code names and jargon required meticulous coordination. Agents were trained to memorize extensive lists of these terms. Often, these lists were not written down in full, or if they were encrypted themselves or kept in small, easily destroyable formats. The danger was always the same. If an agent was captured and forced to reveal their code names, an entire network could be compromised. Consider a meeting between a Medici spy and an informant in the shadowy backrooms of a Roman tavern. The spy might ask, "How is the health of the Black Raven today? Is his nest secure, or are the wolves circling?" The informant, knowing the jargon, would understand this as a query about the Pope's security and the movements of his enemies. Their reply, "The raven eats well, but some young wolves have begun to sharpen their teeth near the shepherd's flock," would indicate that the Pope was safe for now, but new threats were emerging from within his own church. These layers of linguistic deception were especially crucial in an era where letters were often intercepted and read by various parties, postal clerks, border guards, or rival intelligence agencies. Even if a coded message was broken, the presence of code names and jargon would still prevent a full understanding of its content. An enemy might decipher the letters, but without the specific dictionary of code names, they would still be left with a nonsensical jumble of words. Historians poring over Medici archives have occasionally discovered partial lists of these code names, sometimes written on the back of financial ledgers or tucked away in forgotten corners of diplomatic pouches. These fragments offer tantalizing glimpses into the true identities of key figures and the nature of sensitive operations. The systematic use of code names and jargon allowed the Medici to discuss matters of immense importance, from financial machinations to political assassinations, again, in public or semi-public settings, or in correspondence that might be casually inspected, all while maintaining a vital layer of secrecy. It was a testament to their deep understanding of human communication and the power of language to conceal as much as it reveals, building an invisible network of understanding that ran through the very heart of Renaissance Italy. Number 1, the one-time key and specialized ciphers. The chill air in the crypt beneath San Lorenzo Basilica seemed to hum with untold secrets. A lone Medici agent, a man known only as Niccolo, knelt before a heavy sarcophagus, not in prayer, but in preparation for a single, utterly critical message. This was not a message meant for repeated use of a standard cipher. This was a one-time key situation where the security of the entire Medici family might rest on a dispatch that, once sent and received, would render the encryption method entirely useless for future communications. While the modern concept of a one-time pad as perfectly unbreakable was still centuries away, the Renaissance equivalent involved highly specialized, ephemeral keys and ciphers designed for a single paramount purpose. A true one-time pad requires a key that is truly random, at least as long as the message, and used only once. This was logistically impossible for widespread use in the Renaissance. However, Medici agents employed methods that mimicked its principles for their most sensitive, short-term operations. This involved creating unique, often convoluted ciphers that were designed for a single mission or a single communication, and then never used again. Imagine a specific scenario the Medici needed to send an immediate order to assassinate a dangerous rival, perhaps a nobleman in Milan, who was actively plotting against Lorenzo. This message could not be compromised. For this, a unique, prearranged code would be devised. It would not be a standard nomenclator, nor a Gronsfeld or Vigenère cipher. Instead, it might be a complex combination of several methods. Perhaps they would use a pre-arranged phrase or a poem as a keyword, but with a twist. Each letter of the key phrase would not simply shift the alphabet. Instead, it might dictate a specific complex substitution table to be used for the corresponding letter of the message. For example, the first letter of the key might indicate that it becomes cock, etc., while the second letter of the key might indicate that it becomes P, etc. Each letter of the key would trigger a completely different substitution rule. Crucially, this elaborate system of rules would be known only to the sender and the designated recipient, and the specific key phrase or poem would be unique to this single message. The key for this type of ultra-secure message would be pre-communicated orally, perhaps through an intermediary who traveled separately and memorized the key, or via a trusted personal messenger who delivered a physical, single-use key sheet that was immediately destroyed upon use. For the assassination order, Niccolo might have received a small, thin parchment scroll containing what looked like a list of astrological symbols. Each symbol, however, corresponded to a specific, unique encryption rule. Niccolo would then sit in his hidden chamber, the candlelight reflecting off his intense gaze. He would take the short, critical message, eliminate the viper. Using the pre-arranged single-use key system, he would encrypt each letter. The E would pass through one complex transformation dictated by the first symbol, the L through another, and so on. The result would be a string of utterly unique, non-repeating symbols or letters that had no relation to any standard cipher table. Once encrypted, the physical key, the scroll of astrological symbols, would be burned, its ashes scattered. The parchment bearing the cipher message would be carefully folded and sealed. The courier for such a message would be the most loyal, trusted, and often expendable individual in the Medici network. They would carry the message discreetly, perhaps sewn into the lining of their clothes or hidden in a seemingly ordinary object. Their mission was singular: deliver the message, and, if compromised, destroy it at all costs, even at the cost of their own life. If the message was intercepted, it would be, to any cryptanalyst, a meaningless jumble of characters. Without the precise, unique, and now destroyed key system, breaking it would be impossible. The sheer complexity and ephemeral nature of the key meant that even if an enemy managed to analyze one such message, the key would be gone, and the method would never be used again in the same way. These single-use, or highly specialized ciphers were reserved for moments of extreme peril or crucial decision-making. They represented the Medici's absolute top tier of secrecy, deployed when compromise could mean not just a loss of wealth or influence, but the end of their dynasty. The planning and execution of such a communication were fraught with danger, demanding perfect memory, unwavering loyalty, and an understanding that the stakes could not be higher. They were whispers of ultimate power, hidden in plain sight, and then banished forever after their purpose was served.